All right, so we are live. And with the recording, say just bear with me. That is not even how it recorded during third hour. That doesn't make any sense. All right, so whenever we are recording, here we go. All right, we are graphing absolute values. The first thing I want to know is, can you guys tell me what an absolute value is? What is an absolute value? Mason, what's an absolute value?
Lowest that number can go.
No. You say, don't you have that pulled up?
Distance numbers from 0 to number.
All right, so let's get that written down first. So the first thing you guys need to know is, what is an absolute value? Probably need to be on the drawing tool. So an absolute value is the distance a number is from 0 on the number line. Now, whenever you're looking at a distance, are distance values positive numbers or negative numbers? Like, if I tell you to take, if I say, what's the distance from Sullivan to Terre Haute, does anyone ever say a negative value? Say, how far is Sullivan to Terre Haute? Like 30 miles probably to downtown, probably 20 miles to the south side. So whenever you're giving a distance is always a positive value. And so whenever we're solving absolute values, when we look at those numbers of how far they are from 0 on a number line, so like an example, -5 and +5 have the same absolute value. -5 and +5 are both 5 away from 0 on the number line. I see 4 phones out. Put them up. And so -5 and +5 they're the same distance from 0. They both have an absolute value of 5. -3 and +3 both have an absolute value of 3 because they're both 3 numbers away from 0 on the number line. So whenever you are graphing an absolute value function, everything goes positive. So it actually it's a V shape. And so we'll do the most basic absolute value function that exists, and we're going to graph this. So we are going to graph this equation, y equals the absolute value of x. Now today we're going to make a table. And we're going to plug in numbers. And then once we get the y values, then we can graph our points. All right, sorry about that being a little messy. All right, so we've got the absolute value of x. Now, I'm sure that whenever you were in middle school, you were told that when you made a table of values to do like so many negative numbers, make sure to put 0 and put so many positive numbers in. That's actually okay. And so we would go from -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. We're going to plug these in. And we're going to plug those numbers, each value in for x. So we're going to plug it in here, and then our result will be our y coordinate. So for that very first example, what would be the absolute value of -2? How far is -2 from 0 on a number line? All right, it's just 2 away. What's the absolute value of -1? 1. Now, what's the absolute value of 0? 0. And then the absolute value of 1 is also 1, and the absolute value of 2 is also 2. Because -2 and +2 have the same absolute value, -1 and +1. And so then this allows us to graph. So for that first point, when x was -2, y was +2, so we would go to -2, +2, and make a point.
In the middle, are those lines?
Yes, that's the absolute value symbol.
Oh,
These two lines mean the absolute value. I just don't have a lot of space, but yes, those are absolute value
So
symbols.
like on the x, if it's -2, then like numbers go -2.
The absolute value always turns positive because you're just telling me how far is -2 from 0? 2 away. So the absolute values will always be positive. Now the absolute value of -1, when you put it in the absolute value symbol, it turned in. So when x is -1, y is +1. And then when x is 0, y is 0. So we're going to make a point at 0, 0. And then the last 2 points, when x is 1, y is 1. So that's the point 1, 1. And when x is 2, y was 2. So we've got a point at 2, 2. All right, now do you guys see that V shape? So whenever you are graphing absolute values, obviously on this one we had no numbers being added or subtracted or anything like that. But you're always going to have a number that is like your baseline where it's going to be equal to 0, which will be on that x-axis. And then it's going to open up each way in the positive direction, pointing upward because the distance is always positive. All right. Does anybody have any other questions on that one? So today we are making tables. Now every day we're going to add a little bit, and hopefully by the end of the week you guys won't need to make tables to make these. You'll be able to just look at the equations and get some information from it and then construct the graph. Today we're just focusing on tables so we understand where those V shapes come from. Now we are ready to move on to our second example. And before we start making a table, we are going to have to do a little bit of work here. Oh, I would just want another blank page. Okay. All right, so for our second example, we are going to graph the absolute value of x plus 2. So what we are going to do here is we're going to take the whatever values of x that we have in our table, we're going to add 2 to it and then take the absolute value. So we will always do what's inside first and then take the absolute value. So whenever we go to make our table, we want to be kind of picky on how we design this table. Because with absolute values, everything focuses around 0. So I'm just going to have a spot for my work. But in order to set up our table, since everything is based around 0 on absolute values, I want you to ask yourself, what value of x would make this 0? So what value plus 2 gives me 0? In this case, what plus 2 equals 0? This should not be a trick question. -2. -2 plus 2 is 0. Does everybody agree with me there? So whenever we do this, since everything is based around 0, we're actually going to put -2 in the middle of our table because that's going to be like the center point. And so then we're going to pick two numbers that are smaller. What are the next two numbers in the number line? Think number line, we're going smaller. What two numbers are smaller than -2? -3 and -4. And then what would be the next two numbers that are bigger than -2? 1, and then the next number on the number line would be 0. So we want to choose -2 to be the middle because we know that the absolute value of -2 plus 2, because we always add or subtract inside first, -2 plus 2 is just 0. So that will be like our center part of our graph, our center point. All right, so now let's think about this next. I'm going to just plug in a -4 first. What's -4 plus 2? What's the absolute value of -2? 2. Try to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. Can you guys see that a little better? All right, then for our next one, we're going to plug in a -3. What is -3 plus 2? I've not taken the absolute value yet. What's -3 plus 2? -1. But then when I take the absolute value, that turns into 1. All right, now let's go to the other side. What's -1 plus 2? 1. Absolute value would be 1. And the last one, what's 0 plus 2? And the absolute value of 2 is just 2. So once you find the value that makes this 0, and in this case we found out that it was -2, and we know that's going to be 0. Now we can make our graph following the points from our table. So I'm going to go ahead and put in an X and Y axis, and I want you guys to do the same. And I'm just going to go out 5 each direction. I don't have any numbers bigger than 5. Oh, sorry, that was really crooked. Let me fix that. All right, so we have an X and Y axis. And so we plot the points that we see from our table. So our first point from our table tells us when X is -4, Y is +2. So I'm going to go to -4, +2, and make a point. To the right 4 and up 2, or left 4 and up 2. Then my next point tells me when X is -3, Y is +1. And then when X is -2, Y is 0. So we just got a point at -2 on the X. And then when X is -1, Y turns back up to a +1. And then my last point, when X is 0, Y is 2. So we go to 0, up 2. And we have our V-shaped graph. So the key for your table is to find out what value of X is going to make that 0. So sometimes it's an addition problem, sometimes it's a subtraction problem. It just depends on the numbers and what we see. And then we just pick a couple numbers to the left of that center point, a couple numbers to the right of it, make our table, and everything will be a V shape. Now, later on in the week, we will be adding a number outside of the absolute value at the end. And then on Thursday, we'll add a coefficient in front, and we'll talk about the different things that those do. But I have 2 more examples I want to do as a group. And then we'll do some stuff where you can try some on your own. All right, so let's see. Our next one, let's go with the absolute value of x minus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up, and you guys can do the same. Leave some space for your table. And so for our table, we're going to talk about some x values, and we're going to plug them in. Can we wait until we go through this one? Okay. All right. So on this example, I want to ask myself first, look inside that absolute value. It's x minus 3. What value of x minus 3 would give me 0? All right, positive 3. Do you guys agree that 3 minus 3 would give me 0? All right, so when I plug that in, I'm going to put it in the middle of my table because I know that when I plug that in, 3 minus 3 is going to give me 0. So when I do that, that tells me I have a point at 3, 0. So at 3 on the x-axis, I've got a point that goes with that. Now, if this is where x is 3, what would be the 2 points to the left of those that I could plug into my table? What are the next 2 numbers smaller than 3? 2 and 1. You know, say sometimes you don't have to have negative numbers to see the whole graph. So on this one, if I plug this in, 1 minus 3, doesn't that give me negative 2? What's the absolute value of negative 2? 2. So that tells me I have a point over 1 up 2. Now I can do this. I'm going to plug in 2 minus 3, which isn't that, negative 1. Take the absolute value of that, and I get 1 over 2 up 1. So now, do I have enough points on my table to just make is this going to be a straight line? Like, could I just draw a line and be done with this? You know, say it is important that you have enough values to get the entire shape of the graph. So then I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to plug in 4. So what is 4 minus 3? 1. And what's 5 minus 3? So whenever I go over 4, I'm going to go up 1. And then if I go over 5, I'm going to go up 2. Now I have a complete picture of my graph, and I can extend it. So you're going to find out what value of x makes it 0, because that kind of gives you the center point or the base of the graph. And then just make sure you have points on both sides of that center point to get the complete picture. And then just plug it into the equation to get your numbers, and then we can plot our points. And so do you guys have any questions on this one before I let you guys try one on your own? All right, so this last one is going to be more like number 2. I'm going to see if I like this gridded page better. I can already tell you I don't like recording on this, but we'll see. All right, so let's scroll down. And I've got some gridded paper to maybe make my graphs a little better this time. Let's go with, for the one I want you to try on your own, the absolute value of x plus 1. So you want to figure out what value of x is going to make that 0 to get your starting point going. What'd you say, Landon? No, we did x plus 2.
I also have that one. I have x plus 1, x plus 2, x minus 3.
No, the very first one was just x.
Oh, it means a little.
We just did
that
x.
I messed up with the
And then I've got x plus 2, x minus 3, and now x plus 1.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I forgot that the bar things, I thought was a point.
Yeah, you got to make, I don't know, have you guys noticed that I always draw my absolute value symbols just a little bit longer than my other ones, just so I know they're absolute value symbols? I draw them a little bit bigger than my letters and numbers, just to try to keep those from standing out. So the first thing you have to find is what value here, what makes this 0? All right, what value of x, what plus 1 is 0? -1. -1 plus 1 gives me 0. So -1, 0. Your first point should be over here. All right, so if I pick 2 points to the left, what are the 2 points to the left of -1 on the x-axis? -2 and -3. And what would be 2 points to the right? 0 and 1. All right, what's -3 plus 1? -2, absolute value turns into 2. -3 up 2. Now, -2 plus 1 is -1, but when I take the absolute value, it's 1. What's 0 plus 1? 1. So we have a point at 0, 1. And the last one, what's 1 plus 1? 2. So we have a point at, when x is 1, y is 2. So 1, 2. And we've got it. Now, today, everything opens up. But do you guys remember in quadratics when we did parabolas and we did some stuff on Desmos? Sometimes the parabolas were upside down and sometimes they were right side up. You know, say whenever we did that, it was because there was a coefficient that made it do that. There is a coefficient that makes absolute values flip upside down, which we'll do that on Thursday. So what we plan on doing is on Tuesday, we will be adding or subtracting a number after the absolute value. And then on Thursday, we'll put a coefficient in front. And then Friday, you guys will have an in-class assignment over that.